Hey, everybody. Brian Coate, what's up? You're first in the house. Oh, I got here a little late today. It's 11:20. I think that's the latest I've ever started. Sorry, guys. What's happening? Mark is diving right in. Oh, just hold on a second. Hold on. Wait, I gotta... Mark's diving right in with a question. I got to caffeinate. Sorry, I got here a little late today. I was out at Sir's last night. He had a little party. It was fun. And I didn't sleep enough, but I'm okay. I'll pull it together. Mark, he says, is it possible to have fret edges rolled like Friedman guitars on a high-end guitar I already own by a great luthier? Sure, you can totally do that. You know who's really good at that is Eric at Lush Guitars here in lovely North Hollywood, California. This mic looks like it's like miking my head back here or something. I don't know. I was making a microphone demo for the last couple days. These guys. Anybody needs a good small diaphragm condenser for cheap? These are $75 each. I think they're $150 for the pair. I just got to give a little plug because they sound great. They're Sterling, you know, the Guitar Center brand mics. Man, do they sound good. I just did a demo that will be coming out tomorrow on my channel. Anyway, $150 for a pair of matched, you know, small diaphragm condensers. They sound terrific. Anyway, fret edges rolled. I'm going to try and focus. Fret edges rolled. Yes. Go see, if you're in the LA area, Lush Guitars. He's at Tour Supply in North Hollywood, California at Third Encore. The rehearsal facility to the stars, and his name is Eric. And he'll do a nice job on that. But if you're probably not in LA. I'm just assuming you are. That's a silly assumption to make. You're probably somewhere else. So go to your local luthier. You know, having said that, you want to be careful who you get to do it, obviously. So make sure that you know, just look for some reviews or something, or find somebody reputable, or maybe ship the guitar to somebody like Eric, you know, because that's kind of like a big deal, a feel thing. And it sounds like a great luthier. How come, okay, you had the guitar made by a great luthier, maybe ask him if he can roll the edges on it. I think that's what I would do. I'd approach him first, him or her. Don't want to be sexist. There's plenty of great female luthiers out there. Kathy Wingert. Man, I played one of her acoustics. She's in the beaches area somewhere in LA here. I think she's in like Hermosa Beach or South Bay or something like that. Oh my God, one of the best acoustic guitars I ever made in my life. Kathy Wingert made. So apologies to the female luthiers out there. Go find a great luthier and have them roll the edges on that guitar. It's going to be fantastic. Let's see. Mark has a time-sensitive question for a purchase, he says. Go ahead and ask away, my friend. I am here for you. And Jack says, I'm killer on guitar. Thanks, dude. I appreciate that. I do. What else we got here? I'm going to try and say less. I'm going to work on that. Hi from Italy, says Andrea. What's up? Shauna's here. She says hello. Actually, she said no worries for me being a little late. Old Guy's Guitar Vlog is here. And Keith Ellis is here. All my friends. What's up, folks? When am I doing the Sheriff pedal demo? That's coming soon. I have 3 of those Victory pedals here. I think I want to maybe try and tackle that this week. I've got so much to do. I've got to get this for a pedal called the Constellation from Crazy Tube Circuits. I've got a fuzz here from Dan Electro. I've got the True Spring from Source Audio. I've got the Seymour Duncan Reverb. I've got a Klon type pedal. I've got the Solid Studio from Nux. I've got the mic video coming out tomorrow. I've got some more microphones from Lewitt that I've got to do. I've got some more radial stuff. There's a lot of cool gear that I've got. What else? Oh, and not to mention, the PT15 is sitting right beside me here. And I want to start putting out just some videos of, you know, individual videos of like, here's what channel 1 does. Here's what channel 2 does. And stuff like that. And just kind of like be putting those out occasionally. So, yeah. And if you watched my video this week for the Bogner delay, which is from Donner Prince Electronics all the way from Croatia, great Benson Ecorec clone sort of in a small pedal. I used the PT15 IR in that video, just channel 1, and you can hear it. Now, having said that, the cool thing last night at Sir's, I got to play a real Benson for the first time because Kevin Sir, John's son, has one. So I used a real Benson last night, and it was pretty magical. They sound incredible. His is great, well-maintained, tube Benson. He also has a nice Leslie there. So we plugged it was an OD100 clean channel into the Benson, then into the Leslie, the rotating speaker, and it was an amazing guitar sound. Sit there and play ambient, cool stuff all day. A cheap but good shotgun mic, says Eric. I would probably look at the Rhodes. I have a Sennheiser. It's is it for a camera? I have a Sennheiser for my camera, and it's real thin sounding. I don't know if I like it. So look. It's okay. I mean, look at the Rode mics and see if you can find something there. I know Shure makes them as well. Maybe I'm unfairly judging the Sennheiser, though, I think is possible, because the reality is I think maybe all of them sound kind of like, I'm used to the sound of a large diaphragm condenser like I'm talking through right now. And they sound generally like they've got nice bass and stuff. Even it's, my Samson that's on my desk here, even back a couple feet, they sound great, like kind of like a broadcast mic or something. A shotgun, I thought maybe was going to be similar, and that's probably just me being naive. If it's back another few feet, and it's probably just gonna be that. Maybe that's what they sound like, is my point. There is Tom up there in the top chat. What's up, dude? He says, what is the small amp above your SL68? Also, is the Bogner available to get the ain't talking delay sound, or would you go with something more EP3 like? That's such a the ain't talking about love sound. Yeah, it'll do that, because that's really all about kind of like one repeat and kind of an analog one repeat. I mean, it's a tape delay, but the Benson has more of a, God, it's special sounding. I mean, it has more of a tape delay like quality than an analog delay, I would say. And it doesn't use tape; it uses that disc. But the tape delay to me is not as dark as analog bucket brigade style delay. And so the Benson shares some of those qualities for sure, like a little bit of a little more clarity and stuff than I just scratched my head and now it looks all red. That's more information than you guys need, but how dumb. Why did I do that? I'm supposed to do that. We were doing live streams. Sorry, I'm weird today. It is what it is. Anyway, I would say if I was, you can get the Ain't Talking About Love sound out of a Bogner for sure. I've got the Echoplex pedal as well on my, the MXR on my main pedal board, and it does it in spades. But I could get it out of an El Capistan or any tape style or, Benson style, I would say would be a good choice. Somebody else on the top chat there. It's Fusion72. What's up? Good to see you. And you're saying I mentioned Atom monitors last week for a good for the money monitor, and I was wondering which model you had in mind. I'm considering them a repair of Yamaha HS7s. They have a lower price line, and I'm sorry, I don't know what it's called. Let's do a quick Google search here and see. Atom monitors. You'll find them at Guitar Center and stuff, and they're relatively inexpensive. Like these T5Vs. Looks like at Sweetwater are $199. Those are kind of the ones. They're 5-inch. Look at some of those and see how they sound. Now, the ones I've got, they don't make anymore. I've got A7s here, but now they make the A7X, and they're $749 each. So they're more like a $1,500 affair for two of them. These Atom T5Vs, 5-inch with a similar ribbon tweeter, and they're $199 each. So $400 for the pair. So I would go into something, go into Center and listen to the different models. Listen all the way from these T5Vs all the way up to the A7Xs and see what you think. When I got mine, it was like a big purchase for me. I didn't have a lot of dough at the time, but I was like, I got to get these because, I probably put them on a credit card or something because I liked the way they sounded and they came highly recommended. And I just knew that without monitors, you don't have anything. You got to be able to hear what's going on. So, so I just went for it. So they're kind of like one of the most important things in your studio, I think. It's more important than having another guitar or something. If you're doing studio stuff, it's what you're doing everything through. So you can't you're dead in the water if you don't have good listening. So listen to the cheaper ones, but also listen. The A7s are great. I love them. You know, a lot of my friends like those. I turned Chris Cornell onto those, and he loved them too. He, you know, really dug the way that they sounded. I think that they just the detail with that ribbon tweeter, I don't know, it works for me. Some people maybe wouldn't like it. In a sort of similar monitor, but they're a little more relaxed sounding in the upper mids, a little more, like I would say, just darker in general, is the Dyne Audios. You know, for a similar price, at home I have a pair of the B5 threes, BM5 threes, I think they're called, something like that. And they sound good to me as well. They're a little more sort of low MIDI and a little less clarity in the top end. I would say a little smooth. I wouldn't say less clarity. I would just say they're a little more relaxed in the top end. Maybe it's a truer, I don't know, you know. But I can kind of get used to a bunch of different things, working on different things. But Adams, I always just really liked. Jesse says that he's in New Zealand morning. He says, hello, sir. He says, have you noticed any notable difference between the new Bogner Blue and the older one, tone-wise? You know, I haven't directly compared them, but I always like the old one, too. And so I would say that it reminds me, I never put them side by side and directly compared them, but it seemed to be a really similar sound. So they probably just put the circuit in the smaller pedal without the boost. Always like that pedal. And I have it on my board now, actually. It's a really, really good sort of plexi-ish Marshall pedal, the Bogner Blue. Very, I know it's overused, but very amp-like. It really sounds like the dirty channel of a good amp. And it's not that gainy, so you would, if you're doing metal or something, you probably need more gain. But it works great for classic rock and stuff like that. You know, if you're doing a bar gig and you need a good Marshall kind of tone, you're going to be running into a combo or something. Look no further, and then just hit it with another pedal for leads, because it plays nicely with my Archer, and you know. Let's see here. Music Therapy says that Henning Pauly's Harley Benton signature HP42 guitar is finally now available. I'm sure he's got videos of it on his channel. Will I get one? There's only 42 available, so I think I'll leave those to the other folks. Those guitars are, which isn't to say it's not a good guitar. I haven't seen it, so I didn't even know he had one. I want to go to his channel though. Now you've influenced me. I want to go check it out. Henning's a good guy. I like Henning's videos, and I appreciate Henning and what he does, and we always he's always taking the piss out, and we have a good laugh whenever I see him. He's a cool dude. So I wish him lots of success with those. Greetings from Norway, says Robin. What's up, Robin? We got double D guitar. Let's see, Pete. What is the mic you use for live shows for live shows like this with the external input as well for your guitar setup? Oh, I see you're talking about this one. It's the Samson G-Track Pro. And there's the input on the back. 1/4-inch input, headphone out there. Did I just flip you guys off? Sorry, I just flipped you guys off. I was trying to hold the mic and not drop it, and I managed to flip off my entire YouTube audience. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I didn't mean to. Let's see. But yeah, Samson G-Track Pro. Great sounding mic, and just works and inexpensive. The whole chat just went down to the bottom, so I'm going to back up here and figure out where I was. When did I give up my day job? Says Jack. The last day job I had that I took for a few months was in the late 90s. I had a music store job for a number of years, and I used to teach lessons and play cover gigs and all that kind of stuff. But when I got my first record deal, mid-90s, I quit. It was funny because my boss actually at the time was my roommate as well. And he was a great guy. And I remember getting a call about we'd gotten a record deal and it was all happening, but we got the phone call saying the money had come through to actually start, you know, the advance had come through to start recording, which meant that I had more money all of a sudden than I'd ever had, because I was working basically minimum wage up till that point and just sort of struggling. And I remember jumping up and down and saying, I quit, because he was home. He was my roommate as well. And he was just laughing at me. You know, I said, I quit, because I'd worked for him forever. And he was, you know, of course, happy for me and everything. But that was kind of my last long-term day job. And then sometime in the later, like around 97 or something, I had started touring after that band. A couple of years went by and the record deal was done and stuff. And I learned the hard way that getting signed, not really learned the hard way, but you know, you think you get signed and then you've made it. And then like a couple of years later, like if that band's not together anymore or whatever, you're like, oh, I'm back hunting for work, and okay. And then, so now I got to sink or swim. And, I started getting some touring gigs and stuff pretty quickly in sessions, and I was making a living as a musician, but there was a lull for a minute, and there was a music store that needed somebody, and a great store in LA actually called Vintage Gear that used to be on Sunset Boulevard. It was kind of ahead of its time because it sold a lot of vintage pedals and keyboards and stuff like that. And that stuff kind of became very popular later on. At that point, it wasn't really a thing, like around 97 or 98. They sold Supros, Airlines, all those kind of guitars, as well as like really cool ukuleles that were like painted, you know, like ukuleles from the 40s and 50s. And of course, that became huge later on. I mean, 15 years later, you had this sort of ukulele resurgence and stuff. And so this store was way ahead of its time. When I think about it now, it would have been a very popular store now if it was still around. Anyway, on the corner of Gardner and Sunset. And I worked in there for, I don't know, 3 months, maybe 4 months. And then I got another touring gig, and then I was off and running again. But so I went back to a day job for a minute. And that was good for me to do at that point, actually, to just remember, because I'd been out of the day job for a couple of years, and I was like, yeah, you can be back here pretty quick if you don't hustle. And I've managed to avoid it ever since then. So it's been a little over 20 years, I guess, since I've had a real day job. I don't even know if I could do it anymore. Like, I don't even know what that looks like anymore. To be honest, in this economy now, like the whole gig economy kind of thing, it's, you know, with people doing Uber, and it's like music, it's totally changed. Like for musicians in LA or a city like this, you know, if you're not probably going to go get a long-term day job. I don't think, like, you know, it just seems like with Uber and, you know, WAG, you can go walk dogs and stuff and work when you want, or, you know, probably doing online Skype lessons. I don't know what musicians do these days, if they're like sort of struggling, trying to find ways to make ends meet, but it seems like there's lots of ways to do it without having to go the route of getting a day gig necessarily, although it's very expensive to live in LA. So no matter what, that's an important thing to consider if you ever want to come here. I mean, the paying rent it's a huge thing for somebody every month if they're trying to, you know, make a living on minimum wage. Do I like rolled fret edges? I do. Yeah, that's from Mark. I do like rolled fret edges. I like, you know, when a guitar just feels really comfortable. So anything that can contribute towards that. Let's see. L. Scott Music says he had to keep, that's Lauren. He says he had to keep refreshing to get a link. It's because I was late, dude. I was totally late. It's my fault. I'm sorry. There's somebody up in the top chat. It's Jeff Rupert. He says, coffee on me as always. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you. I appreciate you. You're too kind. Thanks. I can go buy some more coffee pods now for my Keurig. Have I tried PRS amps? Only a little bit. Not that much, to tell you the truth. They want me to do a demo of a MT15 Mark Tremonti amp. They'd asked me if I would do that, and I would love to do that. I feel like it becomes a bit of a conflict of interest with my PT15 and Sur amps and things. So I'm carefully testing the waters of sort of like what makes sense as far as me making videos and demos of other, you know, amplification products. I am going to do some Synergy stuff, and I'm going to do these Victory preamps. Synergy is, you know, they're preamps, so I'm going to use them with my amp, because one of the things I find intriguing about the Synergy stuff is that you can kind of add a preamp to your amp and use it in the effects loop. So if you've got a 2-channel amp, you can turn it into a 3-channel amp, or if you've got a 1-channel amp, you can turn it into a 2-channel amp, or whatever. I guess with Synergy, you get 2 channels in the. Anyway, you get my point. So those are kind of different sort of products, I think, and so I am going to do some of that. That was my long-winded way of saying I haven't really played PRS amps, but I would love to try that Mark Tremonti, the little one, because it's intriguing. It looks really cool to me, and some of the other ones too. love to give them a try. But I just try and avoid things that compete too much. And this is not something, by the way, that Sir has ever asked me to do. It's something just ethically I feel like, well, if they're supporting me and I've got an amplifier, there's plenty of videos I can make about other things. There's so many pedals out there and, stuff like that. So anyway, Danny says he was just watching the So You Want to Be a Musician videos. Thanks for watching those, dude. I put out another one this week on how I learn songs, where I talked a lot about my sort of method of getting down large amounts of material quickly and efficiently as possible. And I talk a lot about Transcribe, which is my favorite software for learning songs. Once again, I have nothing to do with Transcribe. I have nothing to do with 7th String. It's just I paid $49 for that program, and it just works great. So I steer people to it all the time because I think it's a great tool for us musicians. So check out that video if you haven't. I was really happy with the way that it came out. People seem to dig it. Let's see here. Dan Bryan doesn't want to talk about guitars today. He wants to talk about politics, but I can't, Dan, because we would just infuriate people if we did that. If I go down that road, and it's going to be ugly. So we got to stick to guitars. This is a place where people come to get away from. To be honest, I'm so exhausted with just the whole, it's really nice that we can not talk about that stuff here, right? And, I don't know, to stick to the music, because I do focus enough on that stuff during the week. Jonathan is up in the top chat, and he says, Pete, curious if you've ever played Nags guitars and how you felt about it, playability and tone. I have one I'm going to show you in just a second here. I will go get my Nags. It's hanging back there in the rack. I have one. Gidodade is up in the top chat. He says, what preamp pedal would you recommend for adding a clean channel to a single channel amp? Adding a clean channel? Well, that becomes because your amp probably has a clean channel, right? Okay, well, that's an interesting question. I don't know if there is like something like one of the, okay, yes, the Synergy. You just made me think this through. The Synergy will do that. If you got a Synergy preamp and you've got something like a Marshall head that kind of does the crunch thing, but it's got an effects loop in it, you could add a clean channel using the effects loop in that Marshall amp and get something like, one of the, look at the Synergy line, they've got like, Bassman and, Fender Deluxe and all kinds of different ones, I think, that would work nicely for that, actually, I would think. You just made me think when I do a Synergy video, I'm actually going to do that. Like I've got amps here, for instance, my Top Hat and Plexador down there, basically dirty Marshall, and it's got an effects loop in it. So maybe I'll try adding a clean channel to that amp. That's a cool, usually people are wanting to add a dirty sound to a clean amp, like a Fender, Hot Rod Deluxe or something. But look at the Synergy one, the half rack little module, Syn 1, I think they call it. You could actually conceivably buy one of the Fender modules and that little half rack unit and add a clean channel to your amp. Jennifer is up in the top chat. Thanks, Jennifer. She says, pro advice needed. Looking for, I was going to get my Nags. I haven't forgotten. I'll do that in a sec. Looking for opening interview question for a supergroup frontman designed to loosen him up, maybe make him feel comfy. What fun question might you want to be asked in that context? That's a great question. Answer it in the comment section there, guys. What do you guys think? What could she ask? If it was David Lee Roth or Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden or Rob Halford or Simon Le Bon from Duran Duran, for that matter, what would you ask the front man of a big band? Let's give Jennifer some answers. Let's see. Takem 1972 is up in the top chat, and he says, love the content. I'm 47 now and more inspired than ever to learn the correct way. A lot of that is due to vids like yours and Tim's. Thanks, bro. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. Anything I can do to help, I hope I can. Please let me know if you have any specific questions and stuff. And with that, without further ado, I'm going to get my Nags. Somebody was asking. Give my bro Steve Stevens some love. Look at this thing. Come on. That's a rock and roll machine, right? This is a really cool guitar. It's a Nags Steve Stevens 2. And it's got a nice round but fat neck on it, and it's sparkle red. And it's heavy, but it rocks. It's got a great rock and roll tone, this guitar. I played this a lot with Kyoshi in 2015. Used it at Fuji and used it on the Road to Fuji tour and stuff. Really, really good guitar. And it's a fun one. There's some other folks up in the top chat. I'm just gonna, before they disappear, I'm gonna let's see. It's Victor. He says, "Would I share my audio video workflow process and equipment?" I can try and detail it pretty quickly. I will do that. Rico USA says, I'll just come back to you. Rico USA says, loved your studio review number 2. Just bought an Pete 88 stage. That's a great one. Switcher. Can you ever use it with combos or powered speaker coming from a Kemper? It won't really work with a Kemper. It's designed to work with tube amps. Designed to work with tube amps. Did I buy equipment for power conditioning equipment? Yeah, I have a Furman here. It's just a simple Furman. It's called the M-8X2. So it's $100 or something, you know. I don't know even how good it is, but I put one in my rack here. I also have a trip light one that most of the amps are plugged into up there. It's behind the amps, and that's how I power them. I turn them all on, and they're all plugged into a trip light power conditioner. Yeah, and I'm glad you like the video review, and I hope you dig the Pete, and I hope I was, you know, helpful in some way, and you deciding on that purchase. So Victor said, would I share my audio and video workflow process and equipment? So I have Sony cameras that I kind of go over this a lot in my studio part 2 video. By the way, if you want to reference that, it's Pete Thorn's new studio tour part 2. It's on my YouTube channel. I put it out about, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago. But I detail the cameras and how I do things in Final Cut Pro and stuff like that a lot. But essentially, it's a couple of consumer grade Sony cameras. I'll record 1 or 2 angles at a time, never more than that. I record in Logic Pro. I have a Apogee interface, and sorry, that's not true. I do have some Apogee interfaces, but I have a Universal Audio interface, the Apollo 8P. So that's the interface I use. And my workflow is essentially I'll plug in and get a sound. And if it's a pedal that I'm doing a demo of, I'll have the pedal on the desk here. I'll have the pedal, dialed into an amp that just sounds cool. Sometimes I'm using the aux. Sometimes I'm using the Sur reactive load for speaker sounds. And I've got all these different amps in the switcher I can use. And I just kind of try and dial up a cool tone. And then I'll have a track enabled in Logic. And I've got some drums up in Logic and my DAW and stuff. And so I can easily get some drum tracks going quickly and stuff. And I just try and dial in a sound and get something going and something that I like. And then once I've got a riff I like and it's sounding cool with the pedal, I'll turn on the cameras. And then I just hit record in Logic. So it's almost like I'm writing a track and the cameras are a secondary. It's the last thing I think about is just, okay, now it's time to turn on the camera. I turn it on and I'll track a part. And once that's in Logic, I'll turn off the cameras and move on to the next part. And I keep tracking like that and just get it done. After I'm done getting a song, finished and recorded complete, I'll do some talking about the pedal and stuff. I'll just fire up a microphone in here and record, on video, me talking about the features of the pedal and stuff. And any additional sound examples and stuff. Once I get all that done, I import all that into Final Cut Pro and I bounce out a mix of all the audio and stuff, bring it all into Final Cut Pro and cut it all up into a video that somehow makes sense. That's kind of my quick flow. For a little bit more of a deep dive, check out that studio video that I did, the recording studio tour part 2 video. Daniel's in the top chat and he says, how good is the Musicom Lab loopers? How good are the Musicom Lab loopers? I think they're great. I've been using them for years. You're interested in getting Effects LE for a small versatile pedal board. Love you're playing in awesome videos. That one I'm not too familiar with. The LE, I don't really know. I've only had the bigger ones. Make sure that it does what you want with MIDI. If it's only some pedals you got on there and you're not wanting to MIDI like to some different pedals, and you need to send channel 1 to a pedal and channel 2 MIDI information. You know what I'm saying? Because I seem to remember about the LEs that it was just a basic MIDI output and you couldn't. But I might be wrong about that. So just make sure about the MIDI features and whatever it is you want to do. But I've got no reservations about the Musicom Lab switchers. They're great. In my experience, I've had nothing but good luck with them, and they've been just terrific. Brad is up in the top chat, and he says, do you see pro musicians using solid state or not modeling amps on stage or in studio? Who had a great tone recently that I saw was Ty Tabor using the orange solid state head. and he sounded amazing, and it sounded great. And he's a long-time user of solid-state amps. He went to tube amps for a while too, but of course the legendary kind of King's X tones were a lab amp. Lab series, one of those 70s lab amps with he had such a unique, amazing guitar sound with the lab amps and the Strats that came out, the Elite, I believe it was called, that came out in the early 80s, and it had an active preamp in it. Pickups were active preamp situation. Just a weird guitar sound. And he also used a MIDI verb, I believe, one of those Elise, or quad reverb or MIDI verb 2. Remember those things? 16-bit, early 16-bit, reverb delay thing. And he used one of those, and that was a big part of his lead guitar sound, Ty's lead sound. He used like a doubling effect or something on the chorus. Doubling effect on the solos, kind of a chorusing effect was what it was. And he'd use that on his solos, and it had this beautiful sound to it that was totally unique, Great. One of the things I love about those days was there wasn't a lot of shit out there, and you had to kind of make a sound with what you had. And he made such great tones with what he had available to him, some simple kind of weird gear. And he turned it into just a unique, awesome guitar. And he's such a great guitar player. I love Ty Tabor's guitar playing. So he's comes to mind as also some great well, let me answer a question that's going to disappear from the top chat here, and then I'll come back to that thought. Harmonicaster says, would you like a Jimi Hendrix action figure? If so, what's your shipping address? Send me an email to petethorn@ymail.com. And that's an awesome question. You're cool, dude. I like Harmonicaster. Pete Thorn and Ymail. Hit me up. Rob Spam Pinato is up in the top chat, and he says, ever think about writing a theory or how to survive as a pro musician book? Maybe, it would be a good book to write and kind of maybe interview people. Everybody from Steve Lukather through to, Mateus Asado or something, like, modern younger players, older players with more experience that had kind of come up through different times. I mean, that's actually a really great idea. So now you gave me the idea, and I will think about it. Anyway, what was I on about before? I was talking about guitar players that had unique, cool. We were talking about solid state amps and who's used them. I mean, I don't know, if there's those Eric Johnson Roland tone capsule things, as well as Robin Ford. He's got one. Whether those guys use them or not, I'm not actually sure, but it's an interesting question. Some classic tones were recorded with solid state, like when John Fogerty used solid state amps a lot on a lot of that early CCR stuff. I believe was solid state. Who else? B.B. King played the lab amp for many, many, many years, so there's another, that was his main thing, I think, for a long time, was those labs that Ty Tabor used. So there's something to that. Neil Young had an amp in Dave Friedman's shop a while ago that is the most insane. I actually put a video up of it on my Instagram because it was so crazy. No shit. It was like this tall, came up to here, and it was full of speakers. And it looked like an organ amp or something it had big push button switches on the top. I can't remember who made it. It wasn't acoustic. It was some other brand. And it was just this massive thing that probably had 7 speakers in it or something, like all in this weird array. And it had a handle on top. That was the fun. It weighed 130 pounds. We weighed it. It had to weigh it. And it had a handle. I mean, they put a handle on top. It was so funny. It was like, this is ridiculous. But you know what? It had a cool tone. It was a neat, interesting tone. Anyway, there's a few solid state amp. It's definitely the minority, right? But there is a few people out there that make it work. And the orange sounded great, by the way. I thought the one Ty Tabor was using, it looked kind of like one of their standard ODR heads, but it was, I think it's like 200 watts or something solid state, and it sounded terrific. Post Hawk is in the top chat. If you had to choose between an average preamp and a great microphone, or a great preamp and an average microphone, which would you prefer? I would probably go with the better microphone. A great microphone into something like the mic pre's and stuff that are in like PreSonus interfaces, or even in my UA mic pre's, for example, are great, like the ones in the Apollo. And I used them so I did this microphone video using these Sterling Audio mics, and I decided that what I would do was use the pre's. I have Neves here and stuff, you know, the BAE Neves and APIs, and I just decided I would use the mic pre's in the UA, just because the person that's buying a $75, $150 match pair of mics, of Sterling mics, probably doesn't have APIs and stuff. So I thought I'll just use the ones in my interface. And you'll hear this song. I'm going to put it up tomorrow. It sounded great. I just recorded this nice little acoustic thing where I had, added some parts, did some percussion and stuff on it, some shaker and tambourine, a little bit of cymbal swells and stuff like that, and did it all using these mics, and it was all through the internal pre's in my UA, and it sounded great. So a good microphone, I would say, is the most important thing, sort of capturing at the source, and then pre's are like a bit of a luxury beyond that. You know, a couple good microphones and a pair of good monitors is probably some of the most valuable things you can get for a small recording studio. And whether you're using a little PreSonus interface or something like that, I would roll with that setup above getting, spending a bunch of money on a mic pre and then having like substandard monitors or something. Okay. Yeah. Up in the top chat is Sonic Blue 1922. Thank you, sir. Thanks all you guys for doing the top chat. I really appreciate it. You guys are way too kind. He says, Pete, can you share your thoughts on SSS versus SSH? So 3 single coils versus 2 single coils and a humbucker. You have SSS and SSH SIRS and a vintage Fender Strat. Do you do any mods like wiring the tone knob to the bridge? Any guidance would be helpful. So yeah, I usually have just about all my guitars, I guess, that have 3 single coils have the tone knob wired to the bridge pickup, the one that would normally be on the neck pickup. And because I never roll down the tone on a neck pickup. I just don't do that. So not my thing. But yeah, generally speaking, it's an interesting question you ask about when I would prefer a humbucker in a guitar over a 3 single coils. So and it's interesting because I'll see players like Mike Landau go through that dilemma where it's like, oh, he's got, in one of his old guitars, he's got 3 singles again. He's pulled the humbucker out and he's put a pickguard on with 3 singles. You see him do those changes sometimes. No matter what, you can't quite get either sound out of, you're never gonna. I did it again. I like scratched my head. Now I'm all red. What a dummy I am sometimes. Anyway, I digress. You can't get one to sound like the other, really. Like the single coil and a bridge of a Strat is never going to sound quite like a humbucker, and a humbucker you can't ever quite get to sound like a single. So it's a dilemma because I like both sounds. If I'm doing high gain solo stuff, or I really want to have a singing, sustaining, smoother sound. It's really about the smoothness. Like a single coil in the bridge, you can keep adding gain via a pedal or something like that. But the single coil Strat pickup is never going to have the smoothness or that slightly fatter character that a humbucker gives you that makes it kind of creamy and kind of, fun to play. And vice versa, you're never going to quite get that twangy, thing out of a humbucker, no matter how low output it is, or whether it's wired in parallel or whether you split it. It's never quite the same as that cool, magical, some of the clean tones and stuff, as well as maybe a stringier kind of lead tone with a little less compression and a little more punch that you can get out of a single. So it's an endless dilemma. And I like to have both around. I've got my old Strat here with 3 single coils. I've got my green SIR. I've got a blue SIR, actually, that I had in storage that I've just brought over here. 3 singles. All those guitars are 3 single coil Strats, and that will not change in those guitars. But I've also got my white one that started life out with 3 singles, and then I put a humbucker in the bridge. My white SIR Classic. And what else have I got with humbucker? And I've got at least a couple guitars with a humbucker and 2 singles. The white one's back there. My Sunburst one. My Sunburst SIR. So I have a couple with a humbucker in it. I got a couple of each, and it's just, you're never going to quite get one to sound like the other. That's my main thoughts on it. So it's good to have both options, I think. Dances Reluctantly is in the top chat, and he doesn't ask a question. He's just in the top chat because he's a swell dude. Thank you, people. Moving down in the chat here because I'm so far behind in the main part of the chat. What else we got here? Somebody else is up in the top chat. But Leon's in the main chat area here. He says, Hold up, Pete. 2 notes. New Torpedo Cab M. How much does the 24 dB quiet the speaker? Oh, okay. I see. Could be like a better option than a reactive load box. I see. It's got a 1 setting attenuator. Well, you'd have to try it to know. Minus 24 dB sounds like it's going to bring it down to a pretty reasonable sort of practice level to me. Kind of a one-shot attenuation thing. And truth be told, that's kind of a if you had to have only 1 setting in an attenuator for attenuation, or in mainly a load box, but it'll work at 1 attenuation point. What do you do? Do you put like -4 on it so that it's like just takes the edge off at a gig, or do you put kind of a practice button on it that brings it all the way down? So I find uses for both would be good, but that minus 24 dB sounds like that's going to bring it down to a nice kind of practicing volume. That sounds useful to me. I mean, my favorite load is still the Sir. As far as reactive load, it's the most accurate, and it just is. But that sounds like a really good product that would be useful to a lot of people. To me, Wayfarer is in the top chat. He says the blonde telly with the rosewood board. Love that telly. What is it exactly? When did I get it, and why? What sorts of parts do you use that guitar for when recording? A telly is such a great jack of all trades. I mean, if I want to do a clean kind of like any clean kind of like funky or R&B rhythm, I used it a lot in a video recently where I was playing cleaner stuff. I mean, and it's great for when I think about grinding up on a telly, I think about Jimmy Page or Tom Petty-ish tones. So I would gravitate towards it if I was going to do anything like that. It has this really beautiful 3D kind of tone because of the Ron Ellis pickups in it, which are just great. And the neck pickup is clear as a bell. I mean, it's as clear as a Strat pickup, which for a telly is a feat. It's a 66, and I got it out of Japan a number of years ago when I was there on tour. Thanks for asking about that guitar. Tom is in the top chat. He says Neil Young uses a Magnatone 280 with 8 horns, 4 10s, 4 15s, and 2 15 passive radiators. The same amp Buddy Holly used. That sounds like a different amp than I saw here, but similar. The one I saw looked like an early 70s kind of thing, like 71, 72, one of those solid state amps that was, I guess he likes big, crazy solid state amps like that. Matt Wise is in the top chat. He says, can you walk us through your basic Logic Pro template for YouTube videos? And I assume your album songs started on the same template. No, actually, I have a different template for YouTube videos and for my album. Many times for the album, especially if I'll have different templates for live drums. So if you're doing anything where you're importing drums that you've recorded at another studio, or maybe you're doing them in, maybe I'm doing them here, I'll have a template laid out for that, for recording a kit and with all the panning and everything going on. Whereas my YouTube template and songwriting template in general, sort of more for demos and not things that I've got live drums on, will have more like Superior Drummer 2. Or Superior Drummer 3 is what I have, and I have Easy Drummer 2. And Steven Slate drums. I've got all 3 of those, as well as a stylus, all loaded up there. So 4 different drum things loaded in. And then I've got basically like a few tracks that are dialed in, that are with the inputs wired for my new studio here, coming from the aux and from the reactive load, so I can easily enable a guitar track and it's going to the right place. And then I've got a series of sends all lined up with some effects that come up on auxes that are like simple, like a mono delay, a stereo ping pong delay, a room reverb, and then kind of a Eventide H3000-esque spatial thing that, you turn it up in it like a micro pitch shift kind of thing. So I can easily just send out to those things quickly and get some reverb or different delays going. So that's kind of how I set up my templates. I hope that makes sense too. That's a very quick way to kind of run through it, but I don't know that I can get more into it here, just sort of talking about it. But the main thing is you're going to want to configure a template to just make your life easier. Like, think about all the great thing with a template is like, well, how can I make my life easy right now? What can I do? What would I want to have instantly accessible in a session? So to make it as easy as possible for me to write music and make music. Maybe that means plug-in amps. Maybe it's like Helix Native or something you have pop up on a channel so that you can just get some amp sims going really quick, or a different, plug-in bias or something like that. Maybe it means having, a couple channels with, amp sim plugins, and then one for bass with a bass amp plugin. So you can easily just plug in a bass and get a part going. And definitely having some drums accessible so that you can, quickly get that going. Somebody's just asking a question here that I need to answer in a text. I'm sorry. Well, people know I'm doing my live stream. Sorry, just had to do that. So anyway, speaking of mics, says Mark, he's in the main area of the chat. He says, tried a Royer R10 yet? I have not. I think that's the lower priced Royer compared to our 121, 122, etc. Clips I've heard sound good, a little brighter than a 121. That's what I found about the 122. We're talking ribbon mics now. A Royer 122 to me, and it was Dan Booles from 65 Amps. If folks know Dan, he had a great live. He actually used to do this well before I ever did one of these live streams. Yeah, and so anyway, he turned me on to the 122, and he said, this is real clear. It's got a more clear sound than a 121, and you're going to find that you can use it without a 57 blended in. The standard old thing when the Royers came out 20 something years ago, I guess it is now almost, was you'd blend the 121 with a 57. The 121 gave you the fat and the fullness, and the 57 gave you the cut. And you kind of need both, it seemed like, to get a real balanced sound. But together they sounded great. And his point with the 122, which is an active stereo ribbon that you can also use in mono, but his point with it was that it sounds clearer and that you don't necessarily need the 57. And I found that as well with the 122, but I have not tried the 101 or the 110. I've just tried a 121 and a 122, and I like them both. And on a budget, once again, I like to give my friends at Sterling a good plug because I've got it right here to show you. This is an active Sterling ribbon in their little shock mount that it comes with. They all come with these nice shock mounts. And this mic is about $200, I think. And it's an active kind of, I don't know if it's a clone of a 122 or what it is, but it's probably not, but it's an active ribbon, which means it has a preamp circuitry in it to give it lots of gain and output. And this will handle really, really high SPL. And this thing sounds great on guitar cabs for $200. So if you want to get another mic that's for a real reasonable price, besides like something like a 57 or a 609 or 906 or whatever they're called, try that Sterling, because it's just I think a great value. Chris Cam says, agree with you 100% on your thoughts on Spotify. He's up in the top chat, by the way. Thank you, Chris. He says, thank you for keeping PT2 on there so I can listen in my non-analog car. Also, Janray, does the Janray work well with the Hedgehog? I would think it does. I don't know that I've ever tried my Janray through my Hedgehog, actually. Looking for a non-mid boost for the amp. Well, so to be honest, if you want, I find the Janray MIDI, not in a tube screamer way, and it's just got full mids. It's kind of a great smooth sounding overdrive that has a fairly full mid sound, but not in a tube screamer way. It's its own thing. If you want a pedal that doesn't do the mid, like if you want a bit more of a Marshally or sort of flatter, like a bit more like Marshall amp drive or something sort of overdrive, try the Bogner, the blue, into the Hedgehog. That could be a really good sound, I would think. Or something similar, maybe the Lagrange or something, which I find to be similar to the blue, but a little bit different. But the Janray might sound great through the recently I did a video where I switch from the Hedgehog to that 71 Marshall back there. And it was the Hedgehog to the PT100. That's what it was. And I switched the lead sound. Now the video is the VT amp switcher, the radial VT amp switcher. It was in that video. I'm playing a solo, and halfway through the solo, I switched from the Hedgehog to the PT100 lead channel, which is very Marshall and EL34. So going from a much more dumbly, Fendery 6L6 kind of thing down to the PT, which is Marshall EL34 all the way. And I think it's an interesting contrast because you can hear in the context of a track the differences between the kind of American high gain lead thing and the Marshall high gain lead thing. So check that out if anybody's interested. Moving down. Did anybody see The Dirt Show on Netflix? There's Chris. I want to watch that, the Motley Crue movie. I heard that they kind of gloss over the entire sort of last 20 years of the band, which is, would be interesting to like the post John Corabi, period or whatever, when they got back together or whatever. It'd be cool if there was some info about that. I don't know, but I haven't seen it, so I want to watch it. See, Gustavo says, Pete, what are the main differences in amp EQ from live situation versus studio besides volume? Less bass, more presence? Cheers. I set my amp EQ live the way that I'm used to setting it to get a good sound in the studio too. And if somebody asks me, this is the honest truth, if somebody asks me like, hey, it's a little bright, can you turn down the treble? I might do that, but I'm just as apt to look down at the microphones instantly and see where they're placed on the cabinet. And 9 times out of 10, when somebody's complaining about the brightness through the PA of the amplifier, if I know where the tone controls are set, and that's where I like to set them on the amp, I'll look at the cabinet and it'll be being mic'd with a 57 that's too close to the middle of the speaker. That happens often. And I'll say, would you mind if I tried moving the microphone a little bit? Because it's always good to ask the sound people that, because it's kind of their job live to place the mics. If there's a sound person in the club or whatever, And generally people are amenable to that. And I'll move the mic out from the center of the speaker. And then they go, oh, that sounds much better. Because it's such a huge, more than the treble knob on your amp, rather than neutering it at the amp end, if you can just EQ with the microphone, if you know where your amp sounds good, right? Like, let's take the room out of the equation. Okay, the types of rooms that I'm talking about are obviously big, like playing big places where, it's like, picture up a speaker and a microphone right up on it. That's an isolated kind of sound source. And, if you're no matter what, if you're in a big arena or something like that, like, whatever's happening on the stage, it's like if somebody says, can you turn down the treble on your amp? And you know that it's where it normally sounds good. And I'm not explaining this well. It's a hard thing it's like, it doesn't matter whether you're in the studio or whether you're on a big stage, right? It's something that's going to remain a constant. And if somebody out front says your amp seems a little bright, it's like, well, it's probably the mic position, because I know where it sounds good and where it cuts and sounds good, where it's not too bright, not too dark on the speaker. It's the same, you know what I mean? It's a controlled, I don't know. I'm not explaining it very well, but all I can say is, if I know where that amp EQ should be set to sound good to me, rather than EQing it for the room or something, it's like there's, you know what I mean? It's that kind of never made sense to me. It's more place the mic on the cabinet in the right place. And then it's like, oh yeah, there's the sound we're used to. Does that make sense? I hope so. Yeah. All that goes out the window, of course, if you're using different speakers, and if you're using a rental amp, or you're using a I'm just talking about if it's a rig you're used to using all the time. But yeah. Do I ever take my amps out of the shelves in your studio for gigs, and do I have separate amps for that? I take them out all the time. I'll just pull them out and take them to the gig if I'm playing somewhere in town or doing something in town. Andrea says, listening to Guitar Nerd. Awesome. That was when I was younger, when I made that one. Not that much younger. Yeah, moving down. I'm way back in the chat. So, let's see. Helix are strong. Mark was asking about time sensitive regarding the order. Mark was asking about rolled frets earlier, if I like that. Time sensitive. If there's nothing wrong with rolling the edges of a neck. Mark was asking about, do I like the rolled edges on a neck? Go ahead and get that done. It's a good thing. Just makes the neck feel a little more broken in. That's my thoughts. Feels a little more broken in, a little sharp on the edges. Helix or Strymon for reverbs. That's from Jack. There's some good reverbs in the Helix. I'm gonna go with, if you want to know, I tend to prefer overall the reverbs in my Eventide H9. Strymon makes great reverbs. The Big Sky and the Flint are both killer. So, but that said, there's all kinds of new reverb algorithms in the Helix, the big kind of ambient long ones that are kind of crazy, and I can make them both work, to be honest, but I think overall probably I would go with Strymon. just as far as the overall quality. The Helix is such a great jack of all trades, though, so it does so much stuff. Having trouble finding an acoustic guitar, says Derek, looking for something that has a fatter neck like a Taylor, but sounds more traditional like a Martin. Have you played any brands that might fit this bill? Let me think. Sounds more traditional like a Martin. Why don't you get a Dreadnought Taylor? Because they do make those. I've played them before. It's not a body shape they're really known for, but they do have a more sort of, Martin style models in their lineup. So I would recommend looking at those, I would think. Okay, moving down. What do I think about the Sheriff 44 Victory amp? I don't know that one, but I do have their preamps here, and I am going to do a demo of those quite soon. Boy, I'm back in the chat far. Be sure to have Kevin on the show when you do an episode from Surge. I was just talking about doing a video with Kevin. If you guys look at my Instagram story, I was at the Surge place yesterday, and he's got a real Benson, and we were playing it through a Leslie cabinet. And so there's a video of me kind of him tweaking the knobs on some videos up of playing through the Benson, which sounds amazing. Real Benson killer. He bought a real pristine one out of Germany that was well maintained, and they're so rare and expensive, but really, really terrific sounding device. So Kevin and I, anyway, we've been talking about making a video now because he's got a real Benson. So comparing the real Benson to some of these other pedals like the Bogner and the Fox Gear one, and I've got a couple here. So I thought that might make a nice video, and maybe try and get us hold of one of those Strymons too. It's called the Volante, I believe. I haven't even tried that thing yet, but it'd be fun to tweak them and see how close we can get them. I'm telling you that the real Benson, though, is pretty magical. And it's got that cool green light in the middle that kind of lights up when you're playing. Oh, I don't know, that old shit, man. It's so much fun to play through. Real Echoplexes and real Bensons and even real Space Echoes and stuff. They just, I don't know. It's like, this stuff is cool. I don't know. All the digital stuff in the world is great, but there's something magic about them. Okay. Michael says he's got a Blackstar HT20 HR Mark II head and an old Celestion pair of Lead 70 speakers from the 80s. What speakers would you recommend to replace them? I'm into classic rock and blues. Those Lead 70s, they don't have a great reputation. I would say classic rock and blues, man, get greenbacks. Is your amp 20 watts? HT20R, just get a pair of greenbacks. You'll love it. They got that woody, slightly warmer than a V30 thing going on. They're inexpensive and they sound great. Good old pair of greenbacks, hard to beat. Let's see. Matt says, Matt's talking to Chris Coombs, so I'm going to move past that because you guys are talking amongst yourselves. Eric says the shotgun mic would be for drums in a cramped, noisy band room for rough tracks. I don't know, dude. I don't know if that's going to work. We were talking about shotgun mics a bit earlier. I don't know if that's going to sound good. Shotgun mics, to me, they're so thin sounding, the ones I've tried. And drums, it's like, you'd be better off just getting a cool, like a cheaper large diaphragm condenser probably, and putting it either over the kit or maybe in front of the kit. That's a cardioid. And put it in front of the drums, and then try and get the rest of the cabinets, everything as far away. And you should get enough of the drums isolated in that mic that at least gives you a cool kind of, somewhat isolated tone. That's going to sound better, man, than a shotgun mic, I think, for drums. I've never even seen anybody try using a shotgun mic on drums like that. So Matt says I'm a legend. I don't know. If my dear departed mom heard that, she would say, don't get a big head. She'd say, you're a legend in your own mind. Rich Monks is in the top chat, and he says, just bought and enjoying PT2 on iTunes. Thanks, man. Thanks for getting it on iTunes. That is my preferred method of delivery for those that want to know if it's digital and not on CD. I'd have an easier time pronouncing L'avenir than pronouncing it. We get it. You're Canadian. You speak French. I don't, actually. I don't. I just, I I took French for 5 years in school, and I didn't pay attention enough. And beyond that, I just I went to France for working for a couple of years, and I tried to learn as much as I could, and I could speak a little bit. Un verre de vin blanc, s'il vous plaît, or où sont les toilettes? I can say that. I can ask for a glass of white wine, and I can ask for where the toilet is. So I got that covered. That's all you really. What else do you need? And un café, s'il vous plaît. To follow up the morning after your wine. But I don't have much else in the French department. But thank you for getting PT2. Appreciate that. Moving down in the chat here. Let's see. Hello from Florida is Condo Dog. Oh, Coon Dog. Never mind. Condo Dog. Maybe like a dog that lives in a condo. All right. Moving down. See most people talking amongst themselves here. There we go. Chris says, Chris Schultz, Pete, do you see using the PT15 as your main demo amp at this point? I hope so. And does it save you time? Totally. I used it on that Bogner video this week, and it just, it sounded great. I hope so. Yeah, I do want to use it as kind of my main thing. But it's great to, that said, I like to mix it up because folks want to hear other things too. And I recognize that. Like sometimes, the Vox is a good thing over here in the corner of my basement over here is a good thing for me to use just as a reference. So I'll use it a lot for sure. And I'll also use the other amps. It's just a good thing to keep a variety of amps in the demo videos, I think. Kali Audio, says Lauren, are killer monitors. Kali, Kali Audio. Check out those if you're looking for studio monitors as well. I haven't heard those. James says my amp sounds like crap. Sorry, dude. You need a new amp. You got to get something cool. Makes you happy. Let's see. Inspired to Victory says he has a full tone tube tape echo. It's great, but a handful. I'd rather have a small pedal. I don't have to worry about breaking. Yeah, they can be like that Benson is the spinning. It's like carrying around a turntable as part of your rig or something. It's part of a guitar rig. It's a little dicey, but what a sound, man. Guess there's no free lunch. Mark says he has a PT100 and BE100. What cleaner boutique clean amp would I suggest to buy next without having overlap? Honestly, I would get something Vox-ish. Honestly, that's what I would do. You've got a PT100 and a BE, so you got Marshall and Fendery kind of cleans and stuff going on there. I would get as a companion that it was hard for me to kind of not get the little Vox AC15 hand wired I have here is just kind of a no-brainer. I would get a matchless or something that's just in that vein. It's a different sound completely and a really great sound to have. In my mind, if you kind of got Fender, Vox, Marshall covered, then you got it, and maybe one high gain modern thing like a diesel or something. What else do you need? You can do your whole career with, that sort of setup. And there's so many great amps out there that, like an amp, I was by Dave Friedman's, and there happened to be an amp that came in. It was a Fender Concert that somebody brought in this week. So a 410 brown Fender Concert, kind of a unique thing that only been made for a couple of years. What a great sounding amp. About probably 40 watts or something, and, turned up loud, and it just sounded like, wow, that's a great rock and roll tone. So pretty cool. Somebody was asking me what coffee I drank, and I forgot to answer that. I'm drinking Pete's right now, which people give me shit for sometimes, but hey, it's got my name on it. No, generally speaking, I'll drink a very nice fellow, Victor, sent me some Track 5 coffee from New York recently, so I like that. It's real dark roast. I still like dark roast. I drink the kind of hipster medium roast coffee sometimes, the intelligentsia kind of stuff or whatever. I like that stuff, but it's got that slightly more it's less smoky, and it's got more of that bite and sweetness that the kind of the medium roast coffees have, and that's not as much my thing. I still like darker roast coffee. So if I'm looking for a cheap one that's pretty good that I buy all the time just out of I don't know what else to get, but at Trader Joe's, I'll get this organic Sumatra because I figure it's organic, which hopefully means it doesn't have a whole bunch of shit sprayed all over the beans and, pesticides and stuff like that. And it's only $7.99 a tin, and I like it. I don't think it's amazing, but I like it. It's pretty good for at home. I like it too. In grocery store, stuff I can get. I like the Pete's. What's it called? The whatever blend, the Major Dickinson's blend. I like that one. It's good. I kind of actually like that even more than the flavor of the organic Sumatra. Moving down. Favorite Canadian band? Oh, that's hard, man. I mean, it's sort of tough to argue with Rush, like just from a overall body of work standpoint and just a career. But there's a lot of great ones, but it's tough to argue with Rush because so many records, right? I mean, they have something like 50 albums or something like that, don't they? I can't remember, but just what an amazing career. And also a beautiful kind of synergy between those three guys. And they're, that Rush movie that came out, if nobody's seen it or anybody out there hasn't seen it, 2013 or 14 or 12 or whenever it came out, but the Rush movie that came out, where at the end, they're eating dinner together and they're all, getting drunk and drinking wine and just cracking jokes. And you're like a fly on the wall, and you're like, this is the coolest thing ever because these guys are friends, and it was kind of like a great, they didn't stop playing together right after that, but it was not long after, and you just got the impression like what a classy bunch of nerds, like they just. They just kind of win, certain bands win. Iron Maiden wins, they struck me as another band that like the whole Yannick, the guitar player they added, he takes a lot of shit. A lot of people that are kind of old time Iron Maiden, fans are always like, why is that guy still around? But the reason he's around is because he's their pal, like he joined the band and when Adrian wasn't around, and then Adrian came back and they just kept him. Well, we'll play. It's kind of like the Foo Fighters with Pat. When Pat came back, like, well, we'll just have 3 guitar players now. Let's all just play. Like, I love that idea of just friends, just kind of making it work, in a team. That's a beautiful thing. So anyway, with Iron Maiden, I'll just tell a quick story. I mean, I saw Iron Maiden on the Power Slave tour, 1986. And there was 14,000 people there, and it was a great show. And I'll always remember that with my Northlands Coliseum at Edmonton. It was a great rock show. So I saw him a few years later in 89 or 90, right before I moved to LA. And there was like 3,500 people there. It was not well attended. A record had come out that wasn't doing well. And I thought, maybe this is not happening anymore. I don't know what's going on. And then Iron Maiden went through their ups and downs, right, over the next however many years. 2008. I remember being in Edmonton in my hometown to see my family. And I think it was 2008. And Iron Maiden was coming through town, and I happened to be there. And I knew a local music reporter that wrote for the Edmonton Journal, the local paper. And I wrote her an email and I said, hey, is there any way you could get me a ticket to see Iron Maiden? I kind of hit her up because I knew she had some pull. I was just like, I'd love to go see. And she's like, absolutely, I can hook you up for that. So I thought, awesome. So I got 1 ticket and I went to see Iron Maiden. And I remember in 2008. So here's all these years later. Last time I'd seen him was 89. I remember pulling into the parking lot, and the first thing I noticed was everybody was pulling an amp into the parking lot, like cranking Iron Maiden, out of the cars. Everybody was getting there early so they could go in and buy merch. That was the other thing that blew my mind. Back from the merch table, same building I saw them from in 86. Here it is, 2008, all these years later. Back from the merch tables in the concourse, of the building, lined up as far as you can go and as wide as the tables were, was just people waiting to buy Iron Maiden shirts. And it was all the way from 9-year-old kids through to like 60-year-olds, and it was just like, this is like family thing. Like everybody's coming here to see these guys, and it was like 15,000 people. And the show, I always remember Bruce Dickinson coming running out on stage. The mid stage was his monitors for some reason. They were kind of in the middle of the stage. I don't know why. And he ran from the side of the stage when the show started with explosions or whatever happened. And he jumped off the monitors in the middle. I remember he got air off the monitors and landed like splits. And it just, sorry, that was loud. But, that's just for the impact. I'm trying to give you the experience. I'm failing miserably. But anyway, he was just so like commanding. And I thought, holy shit, and the show was great. And it just blew me away that all those years later, and they had a lot of critics, like just over the years, if anybody saying, rock's dead or metal's dead or whatever, it's like, man, go to an Iron Maiden show. And I was not prepared for how enjoyable I was going to find that show. It was such a great concert, honestly. And I thought, critics be damned and any detractors be damned. And 3 guitar players there and everything. These guys win the music business. All these years later, here they are doing it. And it's just the big, whatever's in the mainstream or whatever's going on in, the press and what it's just, this is separate from all of that. This is it's like the cult of Iron Maiden that is just a great thing that just exists outside of the press and everything else. And it was a wonderful thing. So I'm really glad I went to the show. And Rush reminds me of that. It's like they just made their own way. How can you not love a band that I remember they were basically on the, and they talk about this in the movie, but they were on the outs, like with the record label and right before 2112. And it was like, you guys need to, we need a hit, or we need a whatever, you need to get your shit together with the writing, come up with something, or this is going to be over. And they went in and said, well, let's fail and crash and burn miserably on our own terms. And they do 2112. That's the next thing, faced with, that's the greatest thing in the world to me, and they just, from there, just are their own thing, Maybe that's a Canadian band thing. I mean, there is this sort of salt of the earth thing. Canadians, like when I think about Sloan, they're a great Canadian band. Anybody up there in Canada probably knows Sloan. To me, it's one of the greatest independent kind of rock stories of all time, because they had a deal on Geffen. They put out 2 albums on Geffen. This is around the time that Nirvana came out and stuff. And each of those records sold, like, I don't know, 60,000. One sold 30,000, one sold 60,000, something like that, which the major labels saw as a failure. And so they, at that point, were dropped from the record label. Let me put this guitar down. Dropped from the record label and managed to negotiate getting both of those records back, the rights to both those albums back from their label. And then they simply went and started their own label after that. So they used Geffen Records as basically like a vehicle to get them to the point where they were seen as a failure, negotiated getting, because 60,000 records, that's quite a few records if you sold them independently, right? So they've it's not like they don't have fans at this point. And they were getting better and better and better as a band. Check out Sloan if you haven't heard of this. I love these guys. Album Navy Blues, the great band. A whole bunch of records out, a whole bunch of listening there if you haven't heard of them. Killer indie rock. But anyway, they get their albums back. They start Murder Records, their own independent Canadian record label, and they just continue on from there and keep going. Like, we're not going to stop just because some major record label says that, we don't have what it takes or whatever. We're going to get the records back from them. We own them now, so we make 100% of whatever's coming, from those albums. We'll start our own label and it's a really wonderful, like, independent kind of Canadian music success story. Because Sloan can go to any town in Canada, I think, still to this day, and probably sell 5,000 tickets and play a cool rock show. So anyway, lots of great Canadian music out there. But Rush is they are the beyond the music or whatever. Like, even if you don't like it, how can you not love the story? I think anybody would love that Rush movie. Even if you're not a Rush fan, watch the movie. By the way, same film. I didn't even think of this till now, but the same filmmaker made the Iron Maiden movie. I'm forgetting the names of both these movies, but the documentary that came out about Maiden and about Rush were both the same filmmakers, and they're both terrific watches. Okay, that's enough about that. Let's talk about guitars. Greeting from Hamburg, says Stefan. What's up? I gotta move down in the chat. James says, ever work with a rude or asshole producer? That comment was hidden because but I'm gonna review it and show it. Yeah, I've worked for producers that are less than pleasant or whatever, or kind of like, I've been thrown under the bus by producers before a little bit that are just trying to kind of kiss up to the artist. That's happened. Or like maybe you've got an idea and then they take it as like they take on that idea and they tell the artist, and then you're like, oh, wasn't that my idea I had 5 minutes ago? Little things like that, but that shit happens, you know. Producers are opportunists sometimes and are just trying to, you know, I've worked for all kinds of people like that, to tell you the truth. They're like, whether it's MDs in bands or, you know, certain people that are where you get, it's just, they are number one. You get oh, I get what's going on. Like, you know, they're the producer and the MD. Okay, so the MD is the musical director of a touring band. When you're on the road, there's generally somebody called the MD, and they are the member of the band that kind of is if we're talking about touring sidemen here, right? There's generally somebody in charge of that. That's not the artist. Not always, but generally speaking, there's somebody that kind of serves as musical director, and it's their job to kind of keep the whole thing on track. And if the artist kind of wants to, you know, the artist says, I want to learn these songs for the next run or whatever, it's the MD's job to get the charts or the music or whatever it is to the rest of the band and say, guys, we're going to work on these. And they kind of run that show. A little bit of like a live producer of the whole thing. So in both those positions, producers of records and MDs of touring bands, there can be a thing that exists where you get the sense that the MD is really out for their own, you know, or the producer's out for themselves, and not necessarily for, because you have to be. I get that. Like, to some degree, you got to take care of yourself and you want to do a good job and make yourself look good, but you also serve as the liaison between, you know, the artist and the whole rest of the project and everything. And you're supposed to be sort of working as a team to make a great thing. So it's just human nature kind of stuff. And I find it all fascinating, you know, and that's part of being a pro musician, once again, is learning how to navigate those situations, and just kind of, if it's less than ideal, learning, like doing the best you can to not run afoul of anybody and do the right thing in those situations. Which is it's a balancing act, I guess. What do I think about the Axe FX 3 for live gigs? Well, I have one here, but I haven't used it on a live gig, so I'm maybe not the best person to ask. But I'm still, I have every intention of diving into my Axe FX 3 here relatively soon. And what I want to do is do a song with it in the studio and just, you know, try and make some great sounds and record it, and let's see how it comes out, you know. So I still have that to do. Because I'm excited to do that. It seems like an amazing, deep, incredible device. And I suffer from that. There's only so many hours in the day, and I haven't given it its fair due yet. I really have to get into recording with it, and then who knows? Maybe I'll sell everything if I love it. No, I'm not going to do that. But anyway, Matteo says analog. He's up in the top chat. Thanks, Matteo. He's in the UK. Pagani is your last name. You say analog overdrive in front of a clean tube combo amp. Does a 112 have enough headroom to produce a good 80s hair metal distortion? I'm searching for a comfortable fly rig to switch between rehearsal and stage. Pedals are getting better and better. And you know, there's certainly some out there that that'll do that, I think, to a pretty, you know, I'm trying to think of a good, let me think. Well, the BEOD, that's the natural one. Try the BEOD for that sound. High gain Marshall influence, kind of, you know, modded Marshall. You know, clean tube combo amp, does a 112 have enough headroom? It depends on the power, you know. I mean, if you've got a 50 watt 112 combo, sure. If you've got a deluxe reverb, you know, it might be pushing the limit of, like, you know, if you're trying to get it to thump like a 412 or something. You know, certainly, you know, if you got a Marshall 50 watt JCM 800 112 combo, it'll get pretty close to that sound, I think, if you mic it up and stuff. They're pretty credible, you know, but it really depends largely on the amp, because you're talking about could be any kind of amp you're playing through. But the right pedal, try a BEOD. It's kind of, and a Riot is a great thing. Riot's very sort of, you know, JCM 800 or something, and the BEOD is like modded Plexi. Tim Corder is in the top chat, and he says, just saying thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks, man. Thanks to both you, Tim, and Matteo for doing the top chat. I appreciate that, guys. I do. We got about 413 people online. Nice to have you all here. And Daniel Perkins is up in the Great White North. He says, hello. Good to see you, homie. What's up? Danny says, I need to get over my miserly spending making a cheap sound attractive. Well, you can make a cheap sound attractive sometimes. Did I just go, well? I don't know why I did that. Chris Cam says, Pete, who do I think is the most underrated rock guitar player? Let's talk about that for a minute. We did a live stream in Germany once with Rick. I was with Rick Beato and Phil X at the bar, and we said underrated rock guitar players. What do you guys think? I'm gonna go with you can name them. I'll move down to the bottom. Anybody that's got a question in the main part of the chat, ask it again, because at this point I'm going to move to the end of the chat because I want to. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your question, but I'm going to move to the end of the chat because I want to open it up for who's the most underrated rock guitar players. Let's talk about it. Ty Tabor, says George. I think maybe you're right. Paul Gilbert. I don't know that Paul Gilbert's underrated. I think Ty Tabor's underrated. Paul Gilbert gets a pretty, he's universally loved as an incredible shredder and respected. What do I think about Nick Johnston? He's Canadian, right? I know him from GitCon. He's very cool. Derry Graham. Am I saying his name right? Is he the guy from Honeymoon Suite? He's a great guitar player, man. Agreed. He's terrific. Who else we got here? Who am I missing? Malcolm Young, Ty Tabor. Malcolm Young, I think, though, I don't know that Malcolm Young's underrated either. Maybe he is. Neil Giraldo. That's a good one. Neil Giraldo's a terrific guitar player. He played a lot of killer, great parts, a lot of cool solos. I saw him play with Pat Benatar maybe like 6-7 years ago. He was great. He looked cool too. He had on like a almost like a suit and tie, or just like a dress shirt and vest and tie and stuff. But he's got that kind of like my hair actually right now. He had a cool pompadour going, and he just looked cool up there with like Gretsch or something he was playing. And I thought, this guy's great, and he's done so much great shit and maybe not gotten his due. That's a good one, Neil Giraldo. I agree. That show with Rick Beato and Phil X in Germany was so awesome, and that's Shauna saying that. Thanks. Yeah. I think it was awesome too. And fun just off the cuff to sit at the bar and drink martinis and do that. That's why GitCon's great. Getting together with, I want to do more of that next year. Actually, if I go there, if they ask me. Mick Mars is definitely one of those. Mick Mars did some cool stuff, man. I agree. The first Motley Crue album. Come on, that's a great rock riff. That was Mick Mars. Good stuff. The dude from Giant, Dan Huff. Yeah, well, Dan, he went on to be a great, hugely successful Nashville producer. So, and he was a great rock and roll guitar player. You're right. I mean, still is, I'm sure. Let's see. Who else we got here? Peter Stroud. Peter Stroud's a great guitar player and a pal of mine. At one point, I've played a little bit with Peter Stroud. We did a Don Henley gig together. We had some fun. Man, I had food poisoning. Worst food poisoning I've probably ever had in my life at the gig I did with Peter Stroud. So I had to play. A gig does a funny thing when you're sick, like the adrenaline of a show and just having to get it done. I never felt better during that 48-hour period than, I felt no better than the time I was on stage. At that point was good, but I don't even want to tell you what happened for leading up to the gig I had to do with Peter Stroud. I missed a rehearsal with Don. I was in a hotel room and I was so sick that it was like, I'd literally flown out to Dallas to do a rehearsal. And then we were going to San Antonio to play the gig like the next day. I flew to Dallas, went to bed that night, was supposed to wake up and do the rehearsal the next day. And I woke up at 4 a.m. and it was like, I don't even want to tell you what happened next. So from 4 a.m. until about 10 a.m. was the sickest I can ever remember being in my life. I called the tour manager. I said, there's no way I can go to the rehearsal. It's absolutely impossible. I can't leave the hotel room. And he said, just stay in the room. It's cool. Those guys got on a plane and flew to San Antonio then, and I'm stuck in Dallas now, sickest that I've ever been. And I'm like, oh my God, like what's going to happen? So I flew out the next morning. I managed to get to the little local airport, and on the plane, flew to San Antonio, went to a sound check, did sound check with Peter, and it's so touch and go. Like, I'm like, oh my God. But then I got on stage and did the gig with Peter. He was great. He was filling in for Stuart Smith, just on the one show. And we had a great show. I remember thinking, man, I felt pretty good now. And like after the gig, I was doing pretty good. It was a good show. And by the next morning, I was super sick again. And then by later that day, gone. That's how I knew it was food poisoning. It was like 48 hours in and out, just finished. Anyways, Captain Sexy 90 is in the top chat. He says, I was the one who asked about the SL67 last week. And this week I bought one and he loves it. How do you usually run it? Put everything on 10 and enjoy. No. Okay, here would be my settings. I would try Try presence. If you want to try a slightly lower gain thing, try the presence on 4, the bass on 3 or 4 to taste, you know. Mids cranked up, maybe 3/4 the way up, maybe on 10. Try the treble on 6, and then volume 1, the treble channel volume, on maybe anywhere from 4 to 8. Try those settings and see what you think. Jumper if you want, and blend the normal channel in on maybe 2 or 3. Start there, see what you think. Great rock and roll tones. And then just control the clean from the volume on the guitar. More underrated guitar players. Let's talk. Give us some more here, guys. Prince. Prince is a great example of an underrated guitar player. Watch Prince on the Super Bowl if you want to see just Prince playing in the rain, and Purple Rain, playing in the rain. The Prince's Super Bowl thing in 2007. He's just killing it out there. And you know, I don't know that a lot of people know this, but Super Bowl is largely the vocals are live, you know, and everything else is usually recorded with most bands on the Super Bowl. I don't know if that's a dirty little secret, or if most people assume that, but a lot of that stuff is done, like, you know, it's not live, just because of the intricacies of it. But Prince, come on, it was live, you know, and he probably, my guess is he insisted on that. Like, I'm not going out there and faking. Like, forget it. You want me? You're going to get my show. And then he goes out there and it's raining and he just like shreds on guitar. And it was easily the best Super Bowl. Come on. Easily the best halftime. Easily miles above, you know, he killed it. Hey, Pete, you're switching between 2 amp heads, one clean and one dirty, real dirty. Is there a way to keep your delays clean for both amps? If you're doing that, you need an effect loop situation, post. So, I got something for you. That's a top chat question from Richard, by the way. He's in the top chat. Richard's in the UK. Where is this thing I want to show you? How did I get lost in my own room here? I have something I want to show you, sir. There it is. I'll be doing a video for this really soon. If both your amps have effect loops, this is the twin line from Radial. What this thing does is it allows you to use effects loops on both amps. If you've got 2 amps you're switching between, and you can use the same effects. So in other words, it's got a loop in it. You patch your effects in. Oh God, I'm burping, sorry. Let me gather myself. So you patch your effects in here, and then you've got sends and returns that go to both the amps. And then you've got controls here for the send and return level to the individual amps for the. So this is basically allows you to use, you know, like if you've got a rack effect, you know, whatever it is, you could, or something, or maybe a couple effects in series, you can just patch them in here and then run out to both amps effects loops. And then you're able to use the same effects on both amplifiers. Of course, you're going to need loops in both amps, and it requires some extra stuff, but it's pretty cool. So the twin line is the unit from Radial. So give that a try. Christopher Crooms is in the top chat, and he says, "Hi, Pete. I just played a Gibson R7. It has a chunky neck. It resonates like crazy. Does neck thickness affect tone and resonance?" Yes, for sure. I mean, it's just more wood on the guitar, so definitely. And it resonates like crazy, you know, that, and that's a factor of a whole bunch of different things. But if you play a good one, you like it, you know, go for it. I find I had an R7 as well, and I find the neck is really large, bigger than they ever made them in the 50s, that's for sure. But if it sounds good and you like that big neck, then it doesn't matter, right? Go for it. Okay, other underrated guitar players. Robin Trower, maybe. I feel like Robin Trower gets his fair shake, doesn't he? Jerry Cantrell, I think Jerry does too. I don't know that he's underrated. Fast Eddie Clark always had good tone. He did. Vito Bratta, underrated. I don't think so. He was amazing, but you know, I think during the day people used to give him lots of cred for, you know, the work that he did. And then he kind of, you know, if you go away, like guys aren't, you know, if you're not out there that much anymore, people aren't going to talk about you as much. It's just not going to happen. I think when Vito was out, I knew about him and, you know, appreciated what he did. A lot of people did. He was great. Billy Squier, that's an interesting one. He wrote some great riffs, that's for sure. I love those Billy Squier riffs from the 80s. Let's see. Dave from the Killers is incredible, to be fair. That's an interesting one. I don't know that. I've seen the Killers live, and I didn't get a, it's not a real guitar oriented or I don't see the Killers as being like real guitar driven. So maybe outside of the confines of that band or whatever, which is to say, I like the Killers. I'm not trying to, say, oh, they should put more guitar. It's like whatever it is, but maybe he's got chops that we don't know about that he just doesn't get to use in that band. Let's see. Do I have any recommendations for instrument insurance? Not really. Heritage is one to look at. They do instrument insurance. Some other people might have some suggestions on here. I'd like to know that as well, actually, if anybody's got good suggestions for great insurance companies that they really like for instrument insurance. But Heritage is one that will cover instruments, vintage instruments, and things like that. Wherever they are in your car, at the gig, or at home, or that sort of thing. So look at them maybe. Who else we got here? Let's see. Somebody says Carl Verheyen. I think Carl Verheyen is a great guitar player. I've taken private lessons, a couple from him, actually. Maybe underrated. Could be. Anybody else? Underrated. Let's talk about it. I think Frampton's still underrated. He's so good. Everybody go buy tickets to Frampton's tour. He's unfortunately, he's a pal of mine. I love that guy, and he's suffering from a debilitating condition that doesn't affect his playing yet, but he thinks it could. And so he's announced his what's going to be, at least for the time being, I guess, his final tour. As he says, I might do the miracle tour if this thing doesn't end up progressing. It's a progressive muscular disease that he's dealing with. And so go see him on tour, because I went to see him a couple of years ago. It was wonderful. Please buy a ticket and go. These guys are treasures, and they're, we're all getting older and stuff. We got to go out and support them. Rico USA says, if I already own a Kemper, he's in the top chat, by the way. Thank you, Rico. If I already own a Kemper, other than to act as an attenuator, what other benefits do you see with your aux? Do I need one? If you already own a Kemper, well, the aux is more to use with your tube amps. So if you still have tube amps that you want to use, rather than profiling an amp and putting it in the Kemper and then using it, if I had an aux, I would probably rather use the aux and my tube amp, if that makes sense. The Kemper I would use as sort of the next best thing to that. Yeah, just in my opinion. Who else we got here? Underrated guitar players. More of them. Who else? Jim McCarty of the Detroit Wheels, Cactus, and the Rockets. Wow, that's an interesting one. I don't know his playing, so he would be underrated to me, I guess, for sure. For Shante, he's really great, but I don't know that he's underrated. I think he's one of those guys that also had a time where he was out there and stuff, but he wasn't really comfortable with that and doesn't really like that sort of thing. So he kind of went away, he makes his music when he wants to and stuff, but he didn't want to be in the Chili Peppers, obviously, or at that level. And, so I don't know that he's underrated. I think he gets a lot of, those he did the band's biggest work, was with him. And I think people that are Chili Peppers fans recognize that and stuff. Blood, Sugar, Sex Magic. Friedman BE50 Deluxe, opinion for an all-around rock amp. Well, Dave makes great amps. We live in a golden age of amplification. That's going to be a great choice. You can make some great music with that one for sure. No doubt about it. Okay, who else we got here? Underrated. Let's see. Sir says, burping all that junk food. John's in my chat. Good to see you, John. Everybody say hi to John, sir, because he's here and hanging. We hung yesterday, and I ate a lot of M&Ms and frozen pizza. And something. To tell you the truth, I had a soup last night. I think it was that creamy kind of soup. It was a butternut squash, and I think I don't know. I'm all older and lactose intolerant and all that now. Who else we got here? John, John, what do you think underrated guitar players? We're talking underrated guitar players right now. we've brought up folks like I said Frampton. I still think he's underrated, and Ty Tabor was one of my other favorites here. Who else we got here? Robbie Robertson. That's an interesting one from Ben. Andy Wood, Chris Cam. Andy Wood's he's amazing. He's a incredible guitar player for sure. Dean DeLeo. Dean's a great, I'd say he's a little bit underrated as well. I think folks recognize that he's a great writer along with his brother. And, Robert's a killer writer and bass player and a good guitar player, I think, too. George Lynch, still in the game. I don't know that George is underrated. I think George gets lots of love. Dave Grohl. Yeah, Dave could be, I guess, he's a terrific guitar player and drummer as well. That plays like a that plays like a drummer on guitar. That's what I love about his playing. Sometimes I think drummers make great guitar players because they've got that innate time developed and stuff. Tom Kiefer, that's a good one. Cinderella. He's a good guitar player. I agree. He could be underrated for sure. Matthias Jabs. He probably suffered from the like coming in after and being associated with his brother, with Michael Schenker and stuff like that, and then coming in after Uli, right? That's tough shoes to fill. So Matthias probably, yeah. Am I saying his name right? I think I am, right? From the Scorpions. He always had great tone, though. I always loved those Scorpions guitar sounds and stuff on some of those records. Blackout and some cool guitar sounds. Let's see who else we got here. Alex Skolnick says Old Guy's Guitar Vlog. Great guitar player. Agreed. Testament, and then he plays jazz as well. Obviously, terrific. How about dude in Bryan Adams' band? Keith Scott. Absolutely. Keith Scott, totally underrated. Although, folks that know he's a big part of, he's kind of like the, I consider him the Canadian Mike Campbell. Like Mike Campbell was to Tom Petty. Mike Campbell may be underrated too, right? We think about, Boys of Summer. He played that too. Great guitar player. Simple, cool. And Keith Scott was like that to me too. Just super cool guitar parts that were really such an important part of those early Bryan Adams songs. All the Bryan Adams. So he's been with him forever. So he's still with him. Bryan Adams is another one. Go see him if he's playing. Man, that guy, he sings his ass off still and puts on a great show. He's super health conscious and he looks great. He's he's a study in how to grow old gracefully. Not that he's old yet, but he's like, when we think about Bryan Adams, like his first hits were like 82, 83, and he's just killing it still, I think. Just really great. So who else we got here? Glenn Tipton from Judas Priest. That could be I'd say he could be Jeff Buckley. But Jeff Buckley was like this flash of, and then he was gone. It's almost like, he's Jeff Buckley's like the James Dean of music, it's just like, you know what I mean? Like really, what a great Jeff Buckley. I mean, watch some of the live Jeff Buckley stuff that's on YouTube. It's just get lost in that for a minute. I came late to the party on Jeff Buckley. I discovered it 15 years ago or something. It had already been out for 10 years. And I was late to the party on Jeff Buckley. So great. I had Victor Andrizzo actually was in the studio just yesterday, and he played drums on Wave Goodbye, the Chris Cornell song that was on Euphoria Morning that is a tribute to Jeff Buckley. Anyway, Chris wrote a beautiful song about Jeff, Wave Goodbye, because they were friends. Let's see. Who else we got here? Underrated guitar players. Jan Ackerman. That's an interesting one. Sure. Blame the Soup. I think that was John that said that. Jeff Buckley could shred if he wanted to. Yeah, but he played that beautiful shit instead, right? And wrote such incredible songs. Chris Poland. That's a pretty good one. Once again, I haven't heard a lot about Chris Poland lately, where you can't go away because people forget so quickly these days. Walter Becker. Totally. I like the Walter Becker solo album. The one with Junkie Girl on it and Book of Liars. Is that the song? What a cool fucking song that is. Oh, man. There's a silver star in the book of liars by your name. It's such a good song. Listen to that Jeff Buckley, or not Jeff Buckley, Walter Becker solo album. Some great stuff on there. Great guitar playing too. I like his. I think people sort of didn't like that record. I like his songwriting. It was outside of Steely Dan. John Sykes. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. He's totally underrated. What a badass. I was just listening to Thunder and Lightning in the car 2 days ago. Thin Lizzy album that maybe doesn't get a lot of love. I don't know, but Cold Sweat. Oh, God, I love that song. I got my money in a suitcase. I'm headed for the big race. I feel a chill down my backbone as I hang up the telephone. Stone cold sober and stone cold sweat running down the back of my neck. Come on. That shit is great. Richie Kotzen. Yeah, Richie's underrated. I love Richie, man. What a great, kind of underrated all the way around. As a singer, unbelievable. What do we got? Somebody up there in the top chat. Tom, my ex-wife was friends with Jeff Buckley, really, when he was in Memphis. She said he was the most sensitive guitarist and played Scrabble every night backstage. That's a great story. That's cool, Tom. Thanks for telling that story. Chris did a beautiful thing during his songbook tour, Chris Cornell, because they were really good friends, and he had a telephone that he would have on stage with him, and it was this red phone. It kind of sat there for the show, and you didn't know what it was, and then he finally addressed the telephone, and it was Jeff's telephone. And Chris used to, they used to call and talk to one another a lot on the phone, I guess. And after Jeff passed away, Jeff's mom gave Chris that telephone, which was the phone that they used to talk on. I thought that was so great. And so, of course, he says during the show, sometimes I feel like I'll pick it up and Jeff will be on the other end. That breaks your heart, right? It was, that's a beautiful thing. Anyway, guys that are gone too soon. Lifeson was never underrated. I would go with that. I think people appreciate Lifeson. He kind of took a lot of shit, though, as being sort of the most, not a lot of shit, but he is the most underrated member of Rush, I would say. Because he was so, I don't know. He was it's interesting because he was the kind of the wild card element in Rush. I felt like Lifeson, almost the soup, with his stuff that he would do, and the other guys were the technical, very, the keyboard parts and the bass parts, very shreddy kind of. And then Lifeson he was almost more like the pads with the chords he would play and stuff, and the ringing, the overtones and the drones and stuff. That's so maybe because he wasn't like a shredder necessarily, he didn't get the credit, but it wouldn't have sounded like Rush without him. That's for sure. Elliot Easton. He's a great man. He always played the best solos, appropriate for the song. Kim Mitchell may be underrated. Larry Lalonde, that's interesting, from Primus. That's what I meant to say. Joe Holmes, he played with Daly Roth. Maybe Ozzy. Did Joe Holmes play with Ozzy? I think he did, right? Gary Moore. Maybe Gary Moore never got his due. I would appreciate that. He definitely, when he did Still Got the Blues and everything, come on, he came back strong then and was a big deal. And in Europe, there's no way Gary Moore is underrated. Maybe in the States, underrated isn't the same as not well known, says Harmonicaster. That's an interesting point. David Bromberg is world class, critically acclaimed, but not well known. Same with Jorma Kaukonen. Do I say that name right? I think I did. I would agree that I've never known quite how to say his name. John Butcher. Dave from Foghat. That's an interesting one. Alan Collins. I don't know who Alan Collins is, actually. Sorry. In America, Gary Moore, said Wolf C. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's an American thing. I think in Europe, Gary Moore was definitely got his, Doug Aldrich. Doug's great, good pal, and terrific guitar player. Absolutely. Speaking of Sir guitars, Jamie West Oram, that's the guy from The Fix, right? Is underrated. Some great guitar parts for sure. Uli John Roth. Once again, I think that's an American thing. So folks if you're from Germany, he was up there. A great guitar player. Reb Beach. Maybe so. Maybe underrated. Danny Elfman. Did Danny Elfman really? I did a session for Danny Elfman a while ago. I played guitar. Is he an underrated guitar player? I didn't even know that. What did he need me there for? I got paid. I don't know. Silly answer. C.C. DeVille. I don't know. I like CC, but I don't know that he was underrated. Was Zappa underrated as a player? Probably. Probably. I would go with Zappa being underrated. John Sykes, definitely. I agree. John Sykes is the epitome of like a fiery European guitar player to me, you know. And it was always sort of I love Steve Vai. I love Steve Vai. He's awesome, but I didn't like the collaboration necessarily with Vai and Whitesnake and stuff. And the thing about it is it's got nothing to do with Steve Vai. He's amazing. Come on, Steve Vai, one of the best live, you know, him doing his own thing is incredible to me. But there in Whitesnake, it's like it was such a European sound. And there's something about John Sykes that is a quintessentially European burning guitar player. Like, you know, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's like there's something about Schenker and John Sykes and those guys that just, you know, that have that. It's a different thing, like a different sort of melodic sensibility and fire. And it's not American, you know. I don't know. Just to me, that's Whitesnake. It's like, you know, it's I'm kind of I don't want to sound like I'm shit talking here either, you know, but I've got the same feelings kind of when it comes to Richie Blackmore, and then we talk about Steve Morse and Deep Purple. I love Steve Morse. I've learned so much shit from Steve Morse. So he's an unbelievable guitar player. But when we're talking about Deep Purple, I don't know. I just like Blackmore. To me is always that sound, right? I don't know. And it's got, to me, it's something to do with the European thing. It's like quintessentially European bands need, I don't know. It's like, that's it. That's a different thing. European rock and roll, you know, European metal, European hard rock. It's a sound, and it's like an attitude and a sound. And I just feel like they had to grow up there or something to really be. Keith Urban, great mention of an underrated guitar player. I think Keith Urban's an incredible guitar player, actually. I love the way he plays. Doug Rappaport. Come on, though. Doug gets lots of love in the internet world. Folks that know. That's like calling me an underrated guitar player, you know, calling Doug. It's like we're just not on that notoriety level, as you know what I mean? It's like it's different. I think it is different. I mean, Doug's an incredible guitar player, but folks in the YouTube world and stuff know Doug. You know, folks in the world, you know, it's like Phil X, folks in the world, you know, it's a separate thing. I think it's also, we're talking about, it's like underrated guitar players from big bands of the past, you know, bands that maybe, you know, when you talk about somebody like Mike Campbell, or you talk about somebody like, you know, like Glenn Tipton or something, you know, it's a different thing to me, you know, the guys that grew up in that era that we consider underrated. Alan Collins was in Lynyrd Skynyrd. Thank you for schooling me on that. I don't know that much about Lynyrd Skynyrd, to be honest. I appreciate that. You know, I always think Ed King when I hear about, but maybe Alan Collins was maybe he's like the underdog of Lynyrd Skynyrd. I don't know that music that much, to be honest. So that's one I kind of missed the boat on. That's a vast gap in my classic rock knowledge. Brad Gillis, Speak of the Devil. So I saw Brad on that tour when they record, probably within months of them recording that Speak of the Devil. He was great. He was a great, you know, I don't want to say fill in. He was a great replacement at that time for Randy to come in and do what he did on short notice. You know, he's a fiery dude too, Brad Gillis. You know, I met him a while ago at a Night Ranger show, and he showed me his red Strat, and I said, I got to see this guitar. I saw you play this guitar live with Ozzy in 82 or 83, whenever that was. And, you know, he let me check it out and stuff like that. I got to play it a little bit, that 62 red Strat with the 80 built into it and everything, you know. And he's such an energetic dude. Like, you know, he's a one of a kind. That, you know, he's a unique guitar player, the way he uses the bar and everything. Mark Knopfler, somebody said, and then Stealth Parrot says, no, Mark Knopfler is not underrated. I would go with that. I think he got Mark Knopfler was, you know, on covers of magazines and very popular, and a huge, when we think about, you know, the front man of Dire Straits, and got it, you know, they were massive for a while. I mean, there was, you know, arena and or stadium band, right? So I think he's respected. Firmware is up in the top chat. Thanks, man. He says, all attenuators and IRs inject distortion. This is my experience. Do you agree? No, I don't, actually. I've tested this, by the way. What you're hearing is something different than I'm gonna go out on a limb, because I've done tests where I've loaded with, I know what you mean. Okay. You're generally speaking, when you think your amp should be clean and then you use a load box and an IR and you're like, wait a minute, there's clipping in the sound. What is that? I think that sound is present in the sound, in the speaker anyway. And it's like, if you stuck a microphone up on the speaker, you'd hear it more. Tell me this, this is a direct question to firmware. Have you tried using an attenuator and IR or a load, a good quality, reactive load like the SUR or something, and used an IR and then also mic'd a speaker of the same variety and listened to that sound? Or is it just that you're judging that on the sound of the amp in the room and then you're comparing that to a loaded down version with the IR? Because I just think that you don't hear things as much coming through a speaker in a room unless your ear is right up on the cabinet. Then it's, that distortion and stuff is present in the sound. In other words, even when you're running into a regular speaker cabinet, we just don't perceive it as much. It's hard to hear things like the fits and stuff that you hear through a kind of more clinically, whether you're recording it with a microphone close up on a cabinet or through an IR. So anyways, I've done tests because I know I was worried about the same thing that you were worried about, like, is the reactive load introducing distortion or anything like that? And I've done tests where I've loaded with the reactive load and then loaded with a cabinet. Okay, so all the way in the other room, loaded with a cabinet and gone back and forth. And there is absolutely no difference in the level of fits or a little bit of overdrive or whatever that I hear in the signal at all. Nothing. So at that point, you've taken the IR is not introducing a distortion. It can't. There's nothing in an impulse response that would introduce distortion. So my worry was that something to do with attenuation or load was introduced in distortion. So what I've concluded through my tests in doing it and careful ABs and stuff like that is just that stuff is in the signal, and through using an IR and a load box and stuff, you're just really clinically now hearing the amplifier, and there's stuff in the signal that you just don't perceive when you're in the room with the amp. So I did a whole video about this, actually. It's called I don't remember the title. Should have come up with a better title. Something about why is my amp distorting using IRs and recording or something like that. It's on my channel. You'll find it if you look. And it's all about this topic of this phantom overdrive that appears in your little bit of foots that you think when you think your amp should be clean and it's actually not. Okay, moving down in the chat. Larry Carlton, underrated? I don't think so. Larry Carlton got his due. Jennifer Batten, maybe. She was also pretty, Jennifer was as one of the kind of premier, certainly female guitarists that came out in the 80s when there wasn't so many of them, and she got a lot of exposure and a lot of, I knew about her when I went to MI. I ended up spending a lot of time with her, and I was in awe of her then, to be honest, going to MI and sitting, I did a lot of one-on-one time with her. I was going to actually play in her band. She asked me to join her band as the second guitar player for a while. At that time, when I was 19 years old, I was so stoked. But she was a big deal, and she's great and still out doing, a lot of stuff, very active, playing around. St. Vincent, Annie Clark, good one. She's a great guitar player, unique, keeping the guitar out there. Nita Strauss. I don't think Nita's underrated. I think Nita's out there really prominently these days in social media and stuff, and is really her popularity grew over a couple of years, as far as being somebody that this year, if you went to the Ibanez booth or something like that, big poster of her and her new guitar and her, people didn't know who Nita was 2-3 years ago, and now she's so I don't think she's underrated. I think she's done well. Holly Henderson, says somebody. She's my protege. No, that I'm helping produce a record for. Holly's a great guitar player. I agree. And somebody said Jeff Buckley right underneath. I think Holly's got a lot in common with somebody like a Jeff Buckley. Actually, she's kind of a genius when it comes to writing. She's on another level, writing. I can't wait for people to hear the music. We've been worked on this record for a couple of years now, and it's almost done. It's just going to be mastered here, coming up and coming out. Laurie Basilio, I don't think so. I think Laurie, everybody knows she's amazing too. I don't think she's underrated. It's coming out. Everybody knows Laurie's great. She's got a new record coming soon, and she's just going to continue doing great. Folks know that Laurie's ridiculously good. By the way, she recorded 2 songs here in this room. Did the guitars here. Mateus Asado, come on. Mateus is not underrated. Everybody knows he's amazing. He's the biggest guitarist on Instagram, I think. Nigel Tufnell, totally. Come on, we kicked that violin in the solo, you know. Danny Gatton, maybe Danny, but once again, Danny got a lot of love back in the day, you know. It's just hard when you know time goes by, and if you're not out there in people's faces, it's like, you know, once I'm gone, it's, you know, guys like me, it's like, what people aren't going to remember me 20 years later. You know, it's going to be like, that's just how it goes, you know. We're just guitar players. Bonnie Raitt, maybe underrated. Bonnie Raitt, maybe. Yeah, beautiful slide player, you know, beautiful solos. Andy Summers, no, he's not underrated. Come on. Brad Paisley, no, he's not underrated. Mary Ford, maybe. Robert Cray, maybe underrated. I think Andy Summers got all, you know, I mean, he got a hell of a lot of credit. Okay, we got some great ones here, but Steve Martin. Are we talking about Steve Martin on banjo? He's amazing. Ian Thornley, maybe. Yeah, Ian's underrated, right? As great as he is, he should be. He's so, you know, he should have gotten more attention, I think. Somebody said Mick Mars. I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Oz Fox, that's a unique one from Stryper. I knew Oz back when he was doing Stryper back in the day. He was a good guitar player. If you got paid, you're not underrated. That's Paul. That's a good answer. Miles Kennedy, great guitar player. Agreed. Yeah, not a lot of people know. Noel Gallagher, great guitar player. I think so too. It only gets better too, you know. Chris Cornell, really good guitar player. Worked a lot on his guitar playing as well in, you know, last few years of his life. He was really devoted to getting better at doing the solo thing and playing, you know, learning new things all the time and stuff. And yeah, he would actually, I think he underrated himself as a guitar player. He would always say, oh, I'm a, you know, not, he'd take the piss out of his own, but kind of almost seriously take, like, I don't think he felt like he was a very good guitar player. And the reality is he wrote some amazing stuff. And many times Chris Cornell, you know, it'd be like, oh, you know, I can't play, I'm not a, you know, I'd be like, dude, you're a great guitar player. Like that came out of my mouth many times, responding to something that he would say about his own guitar playing. Like, come on. You know, he was unique. You know what was great about Chris was he would do all that stuff where he'd, you know, alternate tunings, and he loved to experiment, you know. So he was a unique experimental guitar player that would that would constantly be trying to get better and looking for new sounds, and he was very curious, you know, always trying to grow. Axel's up in the top chat, and he says thoughts on Helix plus Seymour Duncan Power Station 170 into a cab. You know, I haven't tried it, the Power Station myself, so I would like to try that setup so I could know whether or not to recommend that power amp. I know Dave Friedman really likes the Electro Harmonix ones for the smaller ones, you know, as good as they can be, like little Class D power amps. I haven't personally tried the Duncan. I would like to try it. You know, and Helix into a cab. If you're playing a gig live, I would run the speaker simulation or IRs or whatever to the PA anyway, and just use a cab for on-stage monitoring. So at that point, it only has to be good enough for you to kind of hear what you're doing on stage, and what's really going to be heard in the house is, you know what I'm saying. It's going to be the IRs. So George Berry says White Snake needs Sykes back. Joel Hoekstra is a friend of mine. He's awesome, and Reb Beach is great. Love those guys. It would be cool. I think even those guys would say, you know, it would be great to hear David do one more thing with Sykes or something, but I think there's a lot of bad blood there. I think David has said sort of that he would be open to that and mending all the fences and stuff, but I think Sykes evidently has some music coming out. Although I've heard that before, but I love that guy's guitar playing, man. John Sykes, he was incredible. Watch some of those, like before the 87 album came out, it was around 85 or something, they did Rock in Rio with Sykes and David. Watch his solos and stuff on there. Man, he's burning. Absolutely killing. Adrian Blue, maybe underrated. True. Listen to some of those tones on Frame by Frame, you know, Mate Kudasai and all those songs. I love the stuff that Adrian Blue was doing around then. Saw him play a while ago at event. It was 3 years ago, maybe, at the El Rey in LA, and he was playing some Beatles songs, and he was, I forgot that he's like a real, he was just killing it playing some Beatles tunes with this kind of throw together band that was, you know, a bunch of LA musicians and stuff. And he was great. And he looked like he was having so much fun playing that music. It was really cool. Philip Sace. I agree. Philip's underrated. I mean, he should be, you know, and Justin Derrico also. I mean, I think people sort of similar, Philip and Justin, burning kind of young guitar players, right? And maybe those two guys are a little bit underrated, I think. Although the Justin Derrico, Tim and Pete's Guitar Show is one of our biggest ones. I think it's got well over 100,000 views. Oz Noy, maybe. Oz gets a lot of love, though. People know. People that are fans, they know. He's great. Rolling Stones, Mick Taylor, maybe underrated, true. Like, I think there's a lot of people that don't even know that Mick Taylor was in the Rolling Stones at this point. You know, like, it's like that. As people get older and they just say, like, folks don't know the history of the Rolling Stones or whatever, or you know, it's like, it's certainly some of the best guitar playing in Rolling Stones music was Mick Taylor for sure. Johnny Marr, sort of agree. Underrated, maybe. Probably in the States, but also huge cult following, and Smith's cult. You know, so folks that know. I love Johnny Marr, such a great guitar player. And in Europe, I would say no. I'd say he's probably not underrated. I'd say he probably gets his due. Ian Moore, lots of great. This has been fun. I'm glad we did this here today. The underrated guitar players thing. You're making me think a lot. Reeves Gabriel, maybe. Reeves Gabriel's, maybe you say his name right. Worked with Bowie a lot. And Ian Moore, another great kind of blues rocker. Mick Ronson, maybe so, yeah. Did a lot of cool stuff. Unique tones, that's for sure. And big part of Ronnie Isley, Billy Duffy. I love Billy. I love the Electric album. And who else we got here? David Byrne, immense rhythm player. Really? I got to get more into his. I never would have. I should study, I guess, more David Byrne. I love, Talking Heads and stuff, but I never really paid that much attention, I guess. Tenacious D, Kyle. I like it. Randy California, Bob Mould, Vernon Reed, Ray Parker Jr. I think Ray, he just did a video with Tim Pierce. Maybe he's getting more his folks are finding out more. He just had hits. That's all he had. Ghostbusters, obviously, right? And that's where his name got really. But he was, he played with Stevie Wonder. He did all kinds of cool stuff. And the video that the Ray Parker Jr. video that Tim put out recently, check that out because he's great, man. And that's a really cool watch. Okay, well, let's see. Billy Corrigan, Brad Whitford. Billy came out at a time because Billy could shred, and he came out at a time where shredding wasn't cool, and he still made it work and did some really cool. Billy managed to make that leap from the 80s to the 90s and do the right thing, and we got to give him credit for that, where he created a whole thing of his own that worked for guitar and kind of solos and the whole nine yards, but Big Muff and like doing stuff that, okay, it's like, we're going to move on. And I love Billy Corgan because he's got that voice, and it's like, he made it work, like there's a guy that just worked with what he had and was in one of the biggest band of the 90s. I made a record with Billy. And not a lot of people probably know that, but we did a Courtney Love record together. And so I recorded like 10 tunes with Billy, and we were the two guitar players in the band basically on this. So that was a lot of fun and got to know him a little bit and stuff. I have a real respect for him and whatnot. Rented says, thinking about putting Thornbucker's the standard set into my Les Paul. Thoughts on modern versus 50s wiring with those? I like 50s wiring. That's what I've been using. Seems to work well for me. I like the roll down and stuff, and so I'll go 50s wiring in my opinion. Let's see, dude, the production on Cult's Electric to Sonic Temple. So obviously Rick Rubin to Bob Rock. That's from Paul. I would say that, yeah, that's true. I like Bob Rock's productions too. Rick Rubin, though, that dry killer, just get to the core of what a band sounds like. Great. Rick Rubin made bands. He got out of the way, and he made bands get out of the way of them. So, that's a good one. I think Rick Rubin got out of the way And he also made bands get out of the way of themselves. I just came up with that. I think that's pretty good. As a producer, I think that was his claim to fame, you know, like, let's not make this harder than it needs to be, you know, and let's just get to the core. And Rick Rubin, that you can't argue with the records, you know, because I know some people that have worked with him and said he doesn't do very much. You know, he's got a great engineer. He tends to like leave the studio a lot. Whatever he does, he gets the results, right? So maybe by not doing very much, or maybe by just doing the right things in the key moments. Like, you know, I've heard like Black Sabbath or whatever, you know, it's like, what did you guys do back in the day? We used to, you know, write together in a room, or, well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to get in a room together then. And, you know, things like that, like little key things. And then he just kind of stay out of the way. I remember working at Cello in LA when it was Cello. It's now East West, and he was doing the Audio Slave, and I didn't know Chris then or anything. That would be 6 years before I met him, six years probably. But he was doing the first Audio Slave album, and I remember walking by Studio B in Cello and hearing the music coming out of there. I also remember hearing Tom and Brad and Tim working out parts, and I would walk by the room and you could hear them working on riffs. And they would, you know, probably cochise and stuff like that. I don't know. And you'd hear them working on things, and then it was getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. And they would play, and it was like a real cool thing to just kind of be a fly. I was literally like a fly on the wall outside the room, listening to the music coming through the wall of them playing. I was working with this band called Box back then, and we were mixing and doing some stuff down the hall. And I remember I never saw Chris around back then, but during the time that I was at the studio. But I remember seeing Rick Rubin in the studio, lying on the couch in the back. Sometimes the door would be open to Studio B there, and he would be lying, just kind of like listening to the music, you know, as they were playing. And it was fun to just walk by the room and hear some of that going down. It's pretty cool. Well, guys, it's 1:26. I've been going for about 2 hours and, I don't know, 6 minutes or something. So I think I better split pretty quick here, but I'll take a couple more questions, or we'll talk a little bit more about underrated. Robert Cray, I agree, is a little underrated. Daniel Lanois, that's a cool one. That was from Tom. Daniel Lanois is a great guitar player and really unique. And one of the only guitar players that I really enjoyed seeing, where I remember seeing him play live a couple times, like, for instance, right up close at Silver Lake Lounge. No, it wasn't at Silver Lake Lounge. It was at Spaceland here in LA, in Silver Lake. And I saw Daniel Lanois play there, and he was playing a gold top Les Paul through an AC30 with some sort of fuzz, very minimal kind of rig. Maybe he had a little echo or something. And I couldn't tell how he was making the sounds he was making. I remember thinking that about him, like, where he would play, and all of a sudden this fuzz had come out, and he'd turn the fuzz on in the middle of a verse of a song while he was singing and play some line or something. Then it would go away, and in the chorus it wasn't on, like the antithesis of what you would think, sort of. And it just sort of, the way he played the guitar with his fingers, he wasn't using a pick. I couldn't really, you know, it's like when you're watching somebody and you can't really tell what they're doing. And that was neat to me, because it's like, generally speaking, you can tell what people are doing, you know. And he's a really cool producer and guitar player, definitely. Izzy Stradlin, yeah, well, huge. I think Izzy got his due, though. You know, everybody knows that he wrote that. You know, the folks that know. Neil Gerardo, he came up earlier. Jakey Lee, I think Jakey Lee got his due too. I think he, you know, no, I saw him play live a couple weeks ago. He was great. I had a lot of fun. Well, this was fun, you guys. I'm going to split, and you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will see you next week. I got videos coming out this week for these Sterling microphones that you see behind me on the stand there. Condenser mics that are really great for $150 for a pair. If you need a stereo pair of small diaphragm condensers, we did a nice little track with them. I think it's really cool. I got videos coming up for the Victory pedals. I got to get to those. Seymour Duncan. Just looking at my pedals I got to do here. Solid Studio Constellation Fuzz treble booster thing from Crazy Tube Circuits. That, like all Crazy Tube Circuits, is so cool. Lonnie's up in the top chat, and he says, thank you, dude, for doing that. I appreciate it. Have a great week. And Dan Electro Fuzz, True Spring from Source Audio. Oh, I've got some Walrus Audio pedals here that I've got to do too, which is a new company for me to be doing stuff with. So that's really cool. Lots of cool stuff coming. So lots of videos to get to. I'll do more I'm going to wait a week again. I'm going to do the pro musician, by the way, so you want to be a pro musician videos once every 2 weeks, because I feel like that's better. I feel like once a week was too many. And I've got enough gear videos to get to and stuff that I got to do that. I also want to do my Vox amps in the zone videos soon. So I've got a divided by 13 RSA 31 here I want to use. I've got my little Vox hand-wired AC15. That's basically an AC30 circuit, but 15 watt. And I've got a great vintage AC30 that I can borrow that I'm going to use. So that video is going to be coming relatively soon here. So all that good stuff coming, lots of stuff to get to. And I hope you guys have a terrific week. Thanks for being here. As always, see ya.